I am starting with a piece of Baltic birch, which is 3/8 inches thick, 5 inches wide, and 46 inches long. I will tape both sides with painter's tape to prevent tear out when I put it on the table saw. On the table saw, I will rip 2 strips to make rails for the front and the back of the shelf. The painter tape is removed, and the next step will be to cross-cut the 3 pieces, which will make up the ends of the shelf, and the one middle piece, which will be the divider. We now have the base of the shelf, and the 2 end pieces, and the one middle piece, which will be the center divider. I will then draw a radius on the top corner, stack all 3 vertical sections together, and cut the radius on my bandsaw. After cutting, I bring it over to the disc sander and sand the edges smooth. So when you're done cutting, you're going to end up with the following pieces. You're going to have the bottom of the shelf. You'll have your end pieces, your divider or dividers, depending on how many you make. You're going to have the front rail and the back rail. I will then take the back rail and trace the profile onto the top back corner of one of the end pieces. All 3 pieces will be cut at the same time, so it's only necessary to measure and mark one of the pieces. I will then repeat this process for the lower front rail, and once again I will trace the profile of the front rail onto one of the end pieces. Using a small dovetail saw, I will cut the notch at the top back, and this notch will hold the back rail of the shelf. The next notch will hold the front rail of the shelf. I'll start by cutting 2 vertical cuts, and then I will finish the notch on the bandsaw to cut out the back area. This is what the end pieces will look like with the notches cut. The next step, I will take a compass and I will scribe a line. Then I will mark the location to drill 4 holes. These holes will be for the bungee cord. I will then take a spring punch and I'll mark the locations of the holes. And then I'll bring it over to the drill press. And I will drill 4 matching holes on each piece. After drilling, the edges of the holes could have burrs and sharp edges, so I'll use a countersink tool to smooth out those edges, and then I will take a hand sander and I'll sand everything smooth. Next, I will add some decorative touches to the shelf. I will start by using some watercolors, and I will do a stylized mountain scene on all 3 of the vertical sections of the shelf. I will allow the watercolor to completely dry, then I will take a wood burning tool and I will burn a pine tree design into each of the 3 vertical sections of the shelf. Wood burning makes a nice high contrast design onto the light colored birch plywood. To assemble all the pieces, I will use a 5-minute epoxy. On a small, lightweight shelf such as this, I have found that this works very well, and I don't have to bother with nails or screws. I will start by gluing the 3 vertical sections of the shelf first, squaring them up with my square, and letting those 3 pieces dry thoroughly before moving on to the next step, which is gluing in the back rail and the front rail. I will allow the epoxy to dry and cure for 24 hours. Then I will do a final sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. After the sanding, I will apply 3 coats of a polyurethane finish with a light sanding in between coats. After the polyurethane finish has completely dried, I will mark the location of 2 holes. These holes will hold two small brads that will be used to pin the shock cord in place. The last step in the construction is to install the shock cord or the bungee cord. This cord will hold your items securely on the shelf and prevent them from rattling off or vibrating off as you're driving down the highway. You could also use parachute cord, nylon cord, or anything similar. Anything with a nylon coating, however, you'll need to melt the ends with a hot knife to keep it from unraveling. Once the cord is properly stretched, it is held in place with the two small brads, and then any excess that sticks out above the edges of the wood could be cut off with a small saw, or in my case, I use a Dremel tool. If using a Dremel tool, be careful not to cut too close to the edges of the wood and end up nicking it. I leave about 1/16 of an inch protruding, and then afterwards I can use a nail set and bring down the nail head just slightly below the surface of the wood, which gives a nice finished look. The shelf is now finished and ready for installation into the van. And once again, thanks for watching our channel, and stay tuned as we'll be hitting the road again at the end of March.